In ancient science, the world was thought to be comprised of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Water was and still is considered to be the essence of life itself. But fresh water is not always available to us where and when we need it. Through the centuries, however, certain people have been able to detect its hidden presence by an ability which has yet to be explained. Water witching, divining, dowsing, whatever name it's given, remains one of the most puzzling mysteries of nature. A solitary figure seeks out a new source of water using a divining rod, one of the most primitive tools known to man. As unscientific or even comical as this method may seem to some, more serious consideration is being given to the technique than ever before. In the past few years, the severe droughts that struck much of the United States have forced scientists to examine every possible technology which might prevent future calamities. Many pioneers died crossing the western deserts to settle the Pacific coast. Yet, geologists acknowledge that beneath those treacherous sands, and those of other continents as well, is enough water to satisfy all of today's needs. But the question is, how to find it? Some of the most advanced research is being carried out in England. Here in the West Country, the word dowsing had its origins, and long before King Arthur, dowsers were finding ancient wells and springs. In those times, fresh water was not only valued, but hallowed, with sacred properties for healing attributed to it. To head our current investigation, we called in a respected expert in the field, Francis Hitchings.
One of the results of this resurgence of interest in dowsing is the growing number of books on the subject, all of them dealing with a specific aspect. I myself got involved because I wanted to write a book which was a state-of-the-art account of it, and when I began 2 years ago, I must say I thought that dowsing was probably all a load of hocus which would never stand up to experimental investigation. However, after that time, having gone to the States and all around Britain looking at dowsers and talking to them, I've discovered that dowsing certainly does work. The only questions remaining for me are the 2. 1, how often does dowsing work? And secondly, how well?
Tom Graves, who used to teach dowsing officially for the Inner London Educational Authority, believes that anybody can be taught to dowse.
When I was in Education Authority, I taught about 500 people. I'd only had 2 really total failures. They were both professional scientists. Their problem was they were too busy analysing what wasn't happening. Dowsing, as far as I'm concerned, is a skill, much like any other skill. It does take a certain amount of instinct, a feel, and practice, and very little else.
Dowsing has always been, first and foremost, a practical matter. When you have trouble with your water supply, like John Mitchell high on the Yorkshire moors, you look for a dowser.
I rely on well water for my everything, in fact. The well was built in 1700 when the house was built, and it's never run dry at all until this year when it completely dried up.
John Mitchell called on Dr. Arthur Bailey, a top-level scientist and senior lecturer in electronics at Bradford University. He is also president of the British Society of Dowsers and is on the Society's list of professionals who can be trusted to go to work on problems like John Mitchell's.
Well, this is the well. Looking down it, there's nothing at all to be seen. So the first thing to do was to establish, in fact, if there is a flow of water into the well or if it's completely dry. I do this by using what we call angler rods. These are they. And by walking around the well, we can see if there's a flow of water into it. They're starting to move, so I should be on the edge of a flow of water now. And in fact, it's quite a strong flow. And they then open out again. So the flow of water into that well is about perhaps 18 inches wide. It's a good flow of water, so there is water into the well. The next thing to do is to see which way it's flowing. And if I concentrate on direction of flow, the rods move that way, showing that it's flowing down in a direction from the house further up the field, down this way, and out towards the quarry. The next thing to do is to see if that water flow is in fact flowing into the well, because if it's too deep, of course, it will miss it completely. So, again, I find the centre line of the stream, and then from there, walk out until the rods cross once more, and that will give me the depth. So, starting off from there, still nothing. It's obviously a very deep flow of water. Still nothing. Ah, there we go. That's it. I subsequently paced this out and discovered the flow of water is about 100 feet deep. Checking afterwards with Mr. Mitchell, he in fact confirmed this figure, that the depth of his well is approximately 100 feet. So this shows that the flow of water is running right through the bottom of his well. So what has happened is that the original 15 feet depth of water that he used to rely on for pumping has disappeared. And this appears to be due to the blasting that's been taking place in the quarry.
Unfortunately for Mr. Mitchell, his property is adjacent to a rock quarry where dynamiting has taken a precious toll. It seems he will have to extend his deep well even deeper. Dowsers have long talked about primary water, water of great purity rising through narrow fissures deep below the Earth's surface. Geologists have recently come to believe it may be formed by cooling down processes at the Earth's core. They call it juvenile water. And although there's a great deal of it, it can usually be located only by dowsing methods, because the veins through which it rises have to be precisely located. Geologists and dowsers are nowadays much more in communication with each other. But in the past, the dowser's art has seemed so mysterious that witchcraft and magic have been suspected. Although the skills of divining were practiced by ancient people, Christianity forced dowsing underground along with alchemy and other forms of occult knowledge. But still it kept going, and modern dowsing began when Queen Elizabeth I imported dowsers from Germany to find underground veins of tin, metal, and gold. Springs, fountains, and healing wells were sacred places long before churches and cathedrals were built over them, perhaps to absorb their supposedly mystic powers. So what happens when the rod starts twitching spontaneously in someone's hand? To people like Pat Lucas, Britain's only professional woman dowser, there is an unmistakable physical sensation.
I was taught to dowse by Mr. George, who came from Radnorshire. He was a famous old dowser and has been dead for a number of years now. Now, he taught me to hold the hazel twig, which is one I always use, this way. Lay it in the flat of the hands with the thumb on the side of the twig and the twig arms resting on the first two fingers, holding it horizontal with the arms nice and relaxed and with no open tension on the throat of the twig. He said, don't put any energy into the twig, it'll come of its own accord. So I know I'm different from a lot of dowsers in this, but I still stick to what he told me. He told me also to go very slowly and to concentrate on what I was looking for, and this I try to do as well. What I feel is an energy, I can only put it as an energy, which seems to pull right through my body, through my arms, through my legs, my stomach, everything, right through. And I get a pulsing effect here very often, as if my heart races. I think the heartbeat does accelerate quite a bit when you're coming into a big body of water, or even a small one. If you cross it enough times, it seems to build up and your heart gets agitated. I sometimes get a dead thumb, one side or the other, if I keep crossing a stream. The total effect is one of physical exhaustion and physical tiredness, plus, obviously, mental tiredness from the concentration. But it's entirely natural as far as I'm concerned. It feels as if you've done a jolly hard day's work, and I enjoy it.
It appears from Pat Lucas's experience that there is a physiological basis for dowsing. Some kind of energy that comes up from underground streams, which dowsers can literally feel. The question remains, however, can modern science find any way of explaining this phenomenon? We are about to attempt an experiment never tried before. In order to determine whether or not a change takes place in the dowser's brain when his response occurs, a new device has been built by a biofeedback expert, John Steele, who calls his equipment a mind mirror.
Now, on the mind mirror, we have the four basic different patterns of brain waves. Beta waves over here on both sides represent information processing and alarm reactions. The alpha, which is a slower frequency, represents an open, passive state of awareness, which is the basis of meditation and other related states. The theta waves, which are slower yet, represent inspiration, creativity, and visual imagery, such as seen as in dreaming. And the delta, which is the slowest waves that we have, we usually expect to see them only in sleeping. We now find in healing and in ESP phenomena, and we would expect to see them also in dowsing, which is a characteristic of the mind reaching out into the unknown.